So next item here, I guess we were talking about this earlier. I kind of equated this to going into a restaurant and then using somebody else's used napkin or something along those lines. But
right. So Brian Krebs, he put an article out recently, and actually it's kind of in response to the NCIC, which is the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, as well as the, I believe it was the Secret Service.
Secret Service,
released a bulletin saying that they've recently performed some arrests in northern Texas around some actors who had been putting Keylogger software on hotel computers. So, you know, when you go to these hotels, sometimes they have these courtesy computers in some kind of business center in the hotel, and I guess they rounded up a ring of guys or whoever, gals possibly too, involved in putting, key logging software on there, using that to harvest login IDs and passwords and other types of things, and then using that to engage in criminal activity. They also noted that in some cases, these actors, and this is probably how they tracked them down, they had used credit cards fraudulently to register hotel rooms so they could get access to the network and whatnot without raising suspicion maybe as readily as just walking in cold into the business center there. So I think we all know for the most part, if you're watching this program, most people are pretty security savvy that you would be very suspicious, or you should be very wary about using any type of machine that you don't have physical access or control of at all times. Even when I use other people's machines that I know, I'm a little suspicious, but maybe we're a little bit more paranoid than most people. The other thing is this is not like the only type of threat that we've seen, in the past. There's been hardware keyloggers that people have used. There was a case a few years ago at a library, another center where there's public computers, where they had put the hardware keyloggers in between the keyboard and the USB, which is another method that's very hard to detect unless you're visually checking the machines when you got to use them. And we've also heard stories about even in hotels where there's those rogue DHCP. A little bit different, but they can kind of do man-in-the-middle type of injection on your network connectivity using the hotel network. Anyway, one of the things I thought was interesting, besides the whole article in general, and one of these things you want to be aware of and be conscientious of when you're at a hotel, and I would recommend, don't use a hotel computer. Use your own if you can at all possible. And if you do have to use one, try to minimize your the ability for somebody to leverage something there. So if you have, if you have a file or an email you want to look at, maybe send it to one of those temporary throwaway email services from your phone, and then bring it up on the hotel computer. So that's the only thing that you'd be able to get is that one email at this temporary email, and then print it, or if that's what you need to do, like maybe your flight or something. Boarding passes, those kinds of things. Yeah. But Brian Krebs also referenced one of these articles from Microsoft, which I thought was interesting because I hadn't seen this before. But they had posted probably a while back their 10 immutable laws of security, which I thought was interesting. And he referenced that number 3 is the one we're kind of talking about here. We have it up on the screen. If a bad guy has unrestricted physical access to your computer, it's not your computer anymore. So basically saying, don't trust a machine that you don't have physical access to at all times, because that's one of the main tenets of, if you can physically access a machine, it's basically game over. There's really no way to protect a device if somebody has physical access to it, because there's so many different ways to take control of that device, without just having to type on a keyboard. You could replace hard drives, you could copy, you could do all kinds of things if you have physical access.
Well, it is conceivably possible, and particularly under certain circumstances. Take a look at a bank or some file cabinets are designed to protect against physical access, but there's a time associated with that, and there are circumstances associated with that. And the intent in most cases where you're trying to protect things from physical intrusion, the intent is to just buy some time so that the authorities can get there, so that they can be detected, or at least when you come back you realize that it's been physically modified. I have not seen very many computers that have any sort of physical tamper protection. So I'm trying to reinforce your point here, in that absolutely, if somebody has physical access to your computer.
And even things that do, like an ATM, You know, we've seen lots of cases where skimmers can be added right onto it because they have physical access to the device. There was another story we covered a few weeks ago when Stan was here, where some Russian guys had figured out how to inject a actual printed circuit board into the card reader and take control of the ATM. So, I mean, if you have physical access, there's a lot of things that, you know, can be done, especially if you understand how the machine works.
Absolutely.
At a very detailed level.
That's true.
It's interesting. There's a lot of the Internet of Things hacks that are coming out now. You know, a lot of people are assuming it's the vulnerabilities are inherent because they're attached to the network. But actually, a lot of the really interesting research is people who are buying these things, taking them home, put them on the workbench, you know, ripping information out of the hard-coded chips and finding encryption keys, and then going back and doing it over the network with even more knowledge.
Right.
It's at that point it becomes a real, like, everything connected to the internet is vulnerable, but only because the work has been done against the physical device prior.
Yeah, absolutely true. Right. Yeah, good point. Well, I guess what we'll do here is we'll make it a homework assignment for folks to take a closer look at some of these other immutable laws. Certainly, there are 10 of them here. We're showing giving you access to the 10, and it's right off the Microsoft website. So very good things to keep in mind. And I guess one of the things I thought would be worth pointing out, you said don't use a computer that has been in someone else's control or that you haven't had control of from a physical standpoint. I think this will be a good, basically an awareness topic to include as a part of any corporate security program, that is to make sure that it's not just the security savvy folks, but it's the folks in general realize that when they go to another computer, they are taking some risks, and perhaps some advice around those lines. First of all, USB devices shouldn't be plugged into computers that you're not familiar with, unless you plan on throwing it away. Right. A CD is much better, particularly if it's a it's a one-time write CD. You can put some data on there. Now, keep in mind what data is going on there. You're basically giving away, but at least you don't have the opportunity for it to get rewritten and then come back and infect your own computer. So things can spread through these computers as well, as something that folks will need to be paying attention to.
Right. I would pay good money to have a nice high-capacity drive with a physical write switch. I have not seen those in so long. I have to go back to like my 256 megabyte old key to do that.
Yeah, the floppies used to always have this.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They do.
Yeah, they got rid of those, right?
Right.
We used to have Write Protect notches, and you put a little
I
piece of
dated
tape
myself
over
again.
on your 5 1/4 inch
Yeah, put the
disc.
tape over it. The tape would always fall off, and then you end up, whoops, no, that's not so good.
Yeah,
Right.
the USB thumb drives I've seen, they have, you know, write protection ones, but like you said, they're very hard to find.
Yeah. Now, these 10 immutable laws are here just in bullet form, but if you go to the Microsoft website, there's a little bit of explanation around all those. And certainly, if you have any questions or comments, or you want to debate this a little bit further, feel free to contact us. We certainly welcome your input. Remember, it's ThreatTraq@list.att.com to contact us through email.
We could probably make one, maybe 2 or 3 shows about debating these topics amongst us, honestly.
And perhaps we will.
We could.